Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to take place in the 33rd chapter in the book of Job. The 32nd chapter opens with silence, and this is unusual because thus far we've heard an unending continuum of responses. We heard from Job the 9th time, and the 9th and final time we heard from him in the span of 6 chapters, well, 5 excluding the 28th. We personally believe that was the author of Job inserting his own thing and not Job speaking. But in any case, we are about to hear from an equally long-winded, or perhaps even more so, because the man we haven't met for, he steps up and he is mad at Job, and he is also mad at Job's participants. He takes his complaint against Job in the 33rd to the 37th chapter. So there are 6 chapters we hear from this hitherto unnamed man, a young man by the name of Elihu, and he directs his criticism against the 3 comforters, though he doesn't call them by name. Verse 3, and against his 3 friends his wrath burned, because they had found no answer, and pronounced Elohim wicked. 3 friends were Zophar Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamanite. And this is the second of the 4th times we read that he was angry, and the nature of his complaint against he was angry at Job because he had declared himself right, seemingly at the expense of Yahweh. And then in this he was accurate because Job considered himself a just man, and to be on the receiving end of injustice that he personally attributes the responsibility to Yahweh for inflicting upon him. He justifies himself at his expense. So in this he is right, and he is rightfully angry, but he's also angry with his friends because they had not answered him satisfactorily, and to him that was tantamount of declaring Elohim wicked. So they had dishonored God by not answering him correctly. And, he's younger than all. He is a youthful participant. He's an observer who becomes a participant. We can imagine a crowd of people and people gathering around these elderly, respected, righteous men, wise men giving their discourses. And one of them, he has due deference to the principle of respect for elders. He doesn't speak while they are speaking, but their silence compels him to speak. And because none of them are able to speak, that's why he does. And he says, days should speak and many years should teach wisdom, but this is not always necessarily true. He is chiding these men for their lack of wisdom, for not having what they claim that they have, and speaking with the presumption of wisdom. Verse 10, therefore I have said, listen to me and let me make my opinion known to you. Look, I waited for your words. I listened to your reasonings while you searched out what to say, and I paid close attention. But look, not one of you proved Job wrong, nor answered his words. So that he's begging to be heard in the nature of what he has to say, the opinion that he wishes to make known. Is that, he's heard, he was a meticulous observer, nothing escaped his notice, nothing escaped his mind, and in his analysis of what he has heard from the accumulated observations, he says that they have not answered Job satisfactorily, none of them had proved him wrong, they came at him with libelous accusations. So Elihu approaches Job from a different angle than his 3 somewhat misleadingly named comforters, who offer neither comfort nor counsel, though that is the express purpose that they are there to do, as indicated in the 11th verse of the 2nd chapter. But, Elihu thinks he can do what he cannot do, and the nature of his complaint is not, the nature of his argument is not to attack the arguer. These men all came hurling libelous accusations that Job was a secret sinner, and therefore he deserved the calamity which was sent his way. And Job stubbornly clung to his own insisted on his own integrity and innocence. But verse 17, let me answer on my part. Let me also make my opinion known. For I am filled with words. The spirit within me presses me. Now, the concept of the spirit as expressed from Elihu, he describes it in the 8th verse as just this intrinsic element in humanity that is part of our nature. We all have spirits which have appetites, receptors, and capacities. There is an entire world that we cannot see the spirit, and as humans we are aligned with that. So that's what's motivating and animating him. He does not claim to speak in the Spirit. He claims to speak in through his Spirit. So this is what's motivating and animating and prompting the filling of words. And this is no understatement, because he's going to let loose a long rip that lasts all the way to the 37th chapter. Then Job is satisfactorily concluded with the condescension of Yahweh in the whirlwind. See, within me it is like wine not open, and shall burst like new wineskins. Wineskins were the containers of wine in the ancient world. They did not have glass bottles. These wineskins had an exterior of animal skin, and but if you put old wine in new wines, new wine in old wineskins, they would corrupt and corrode. So they were not as durable as were bottles. And that's the extent to which he is to burst. So by the opposite end of the same coin, new wineskins, they would burst open, so they would expand to house and contain the wine that they were in, and he is ready to burst and explode. He has this pent-up wisdom in him that he needs to let out, or else he's going to implode. Let me speak so that I find relief. Let me open my lips and answer. Find relief, this means that he's in pain. The reality that he has not yet spoken and made himself known causes him pain, and he seeks relief and rest from this pain. And so he's saying, I have something to say. Can you listen? Open my lips, open your ears, and listen. Please let me not show partiality to anyone, nor let me flatter any man. So he earlier says in reference to Job that he had not personally, verse 14, nor has he ordered words against me, so I would not answer him with your words. He's going to argue differently, because he was not part of the exchange of insults. So we do get a rest and reprieve of the dialogue between Job and his misleadingly named comforters, who do it just degenerates into increasingly acrimonious exchange of personal invectives at one point, although we do get some partiality. So partiality, and this means that we judge without partiality, without prejudice, without personal bias, without nothing but the facts. So he doesn't have a personal element in this fight. He considers himself a defender of God, because it's God that these men had dishonored. But now he's going to turn his criticism to Job in the 33rd chapter, first verse. And yet, O Job, please hear my speech and listen to all my words. Now the author indicated we did not hear from Elihu himself to the 6th verse. So the author indicated that he was angry at Job because he had exalted him. He had declared himself right rather than Elohim, and at his expense, for the reasons that we explained earlier. So he hitherto nothing he has said is directed towards Job. The entire speech is going to be directed towards Job. He's going to be talking to Job henceforward. He already satisfactorily and sufficiently to his satisfaction expresses his distaste with the three comforters. Now he moves on to Job, and he says that he has something worth paying attention to. Listen to all my words. So what I have to say is important. Listen, learn. See, please, I shall open my mouth. My tongue shall speak in my mouth. Nothing extraordinary about that procedure. This is the physical mechanics and motions of speaking. One opens one mouth and the tongue is engaged and speaks in the mouth. And so that's just what happens in the physical process of speaking. But he's letting him know that he is speaking now. My words are from the uprightness of my heart. My lips shall speak knowledge clearly. He claims the same thing that Job does, pure motives, innocent. He is saying that he is righteous. I am upright in heart. In my words, the contents of the heart determines the contents of our language. So these words spring from an upright heart. He has no axe to grind against him. He is not vindictive enough to libelously accuse him of some secret hidden sin. He's going to correct what he speaks about God, and this is the knowledge that he has confidence not only in his knowledge but his ability to communicate it effectively. And one of the ways he's reeling them in is by prefacing what he has to say with admonitions to pay attention. And the knowledge which he speaks of is the knowledge that Job is implicitly lacking about the nature of divinity. Verse 4, the spirit of El has made me, and the breath of El Shaddai gives me life. Not only him, but everyone else. The spirit is a part of our creation. The Hebrew word ruah is closely connected to breath or spirit, and it is read that we are breathed the spirit of life in us in Genesis 2:7. So the spirit is, but all our spiritual elements emanate from the ruah of El, which blew his influence into Adam and through us. If you are able, answer me, but put yourself in order before me. Take your stand. He has pretty clear-cut confidence. This is a superiority complex. He's saying that he is smarter than me. If you can, if you are able, I'll leave it open to you, but Yahweh does interrupt before Job can answer when he's all said and done. But he's challenging him to step up to the plate, and he's saying that my logic is unassailable, my conclusions are irrefutable. You're welcome to dissect it. Pay attention to what I say with the same diligence that I paid attention to what you and your comforters, misleadingly named, said, and you will be convinced as I am. See, I am like you before El. I too have been formed out of clay. He's nothing special. We are nothing special. We are formed out of clay, the dust of the earth, and the physical properties of dust do match the DNA and just our physical fiber. We are every physical element in us is can be connected to dust. So that is not just a theological assumption; it is a scientific fact. And clay. Now, this analogy is used in Scripture by the prophets Isaiah and Jeremiah, and that to demonstrate the folly of resisting the will of the Almighty. How much better were we who are created to not resist or rebel against we have as much right to question the way in which we were made as the clay does to the potter. So we are in his hands, and we are fragile. We are clay. Our lives are not going to last forever. We are weak forms of life, especially compared to the omnipotent one. But before him, we are all equally nothing, and we are all equally worthless. He is not impressed by, even though there is certain qualities that abound more in human beings, he is certainly not impressed by any of us. So we are all the same in his judgment, and the judgment is going to be fair, and it's going to be thorough, and it's going to be swift when it gets here. See, no fear of me should alarm you, nor should pressure by me be heavy on you. He says he's not going to hit him with a heavy hand. This is what he uses, the heavy hand of Yahweh, which was aligned against him. So he does not need to fear him. He cannot harm him. He's not going to add insult to injury to Job. He's approaching him as an equal, as a human being, and he's letting him know that you have nothing to fear from my words. I'm here to help you. I'm here to offer counsel, not insults or false libelous accusations, as his friends all did. They couldn't name the sin, but they said there had to be some sin. And the reason they arrived at this conclusion was their simplistic, archaic, black and white theological prism, which insisted that suffering was the result, the just deserts of having sinned. But Job's experience clearly invalidates the reality and the truth of that premise. But you have spoken in my hearing, and the sounds of the words I hear. He does not quote him exactly verbatim, but he does paraphrase and summarize the substance of his arguments. So these are not exact quotes, but they are at least reflective of something that he heard Job say. I am clear without transgression. I am innocent, and I have no wickedness. So the first thing he says is incorrect. I am without transgression. The second thing, rather. So Job did not claim to be sinless. He says that he sins just like everyone else. But he also claimed to not be perfect, even though he is described as a perfect man in some translations. He disclaimed perfection in the 9th chapter. But he was innocent, certainly, of the calamity, at least the proportion of the gravity of the sin did not merit what had been visited upon him, and he had some wickedness in him. He was human. That doesn't mean he was a horrible human being, because he came to sin just like all the rest of us. No man lives without walking in this or flailing in this damnable fashion. So Job did not claim to be sinless. This is how he interpreted it, and his interpretation was not justifiably accurate to the one who he was proceeding to quote in the presence of himself. See, he finds occasions against me. He counts me as his enemy. This was true. Job did describe himself as being treated like Yahweh's enemy. He never declared Yahweh his enemy, but he declared himself to be he declared Yahweh to have declared him an enemy. And what Job can't understand is he had been a friend of Yahweh his whole life. He had walked in uprightness and integrity, and just been meticulously sin conscious. He was in the practice of offering sacrifices in the off chance that his children sinned, just to cover it when they gathered for their parties. But he's just accusing him of finding occasion against him, an occasion without cause. Job did nothing to deserve it, nothing to merit it, nothing to provoke it. So he puts my feet in the stocks. He watches all my paths. It is inescapable. Nothing we do, think, or say can escape the all-seeing, all-knowing eye in the sky. But Job is complaining about the surveillance on his life. Why him? Why is he the particular object of his wrath? So he was correct to assume that this was a supernatural work at play, but he was incorrect to assume that it was divinity sending it to him. It was Satan at the sovereign permission and behest of Yahweh, and he does not tempt us beyond our ability to endure or our capacity to endure, 1 Corinthians 10:13, and he always offers a means of escape. So Job did have to go through a painful period of experience, but he is ultimately vindicated and restored. But he does not receive the answer to the question of why did this happen. See, in this you have not been righteous. Let me answer you. Eloah is greater than man. So Job claimed righteous, and he claimed it to the danger of being self-righteous. We've identified some of the instances earlier. The 37th verse of the 31st chapter, he would approach him like a prince. That's an act of presumption and self-righteous. So Job's problem was that he considered himself righteous, because once he accused God of unrighteousness for having inflicted this injustice on him, for having done nothing to deserve it, and no explanation or no reason. But he's saying that he has not been righteous, so he is claiming righteousness for himself. He's claiming to be wiser and the better man with this argument. And so much of, now he says Eloah is greater than man, so he is not in the practice or of the one-upmanship of proving himself to be the better man than Job. He still considers him an equal. He's looking him in the eye. He's not looking down on him. But he's saying that Eloah is looking down on us. He is greater than any of us, and we can never hope to equal or measure in any way, shape, form, or fashion anything near his greatness. Why have you complained against him? Because he does not answer all his matters? Job's, one of his most persistent complaints was that where was God? Where was an answer from God when he needed him most? And he longed for an audience. This was his persistent and consistent prayer, that he would answer and be vindicated, and he would present his petition. He would know exactly what to say. Earlier, he says, in an earlier chapter, he says he would be tongue-tied even if he did deign to give him an audience. But then as he gathers momentum and progression, he eventually says that he would know exactly what to say. But he is correct in his original assumption. He says two things: I am unworthy and I repent, in the 40th and the 42nd chapter. For El speaks once or twice, one does not notice it. God does speak to every man. The problem is that most men are carnal creatures who do not have their spiritual sensory engagers to detect stimuli. So and one of the ways he speaks that Elihu actually offers an original input on is, we're not going to get quite there, but beginning in the 19th verse, he says that pain is and suffering is a form of revelation. Excuse me. Why have you so in a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falls upon men while slumbering on a bed? Dreams were a legitimate, they have biblical basis as a legitimate form of revelation. Is not the normative or ordinary procedure anymore, but in ancient times. Now, most of the ancient adjacent Near Eastern civilizations were also found something of spiritual substance in dreaming, and dreamings was one of the way. They had disturbing dreams, and the interpretation, the hidden meanings of dreams were a practice that kings had people at their court to do. But visions in the night, now, this is something that Eliphaz the Temanite claims earlier in the 4th chapter to have been visited by a spirit in the night. So he does speak to us into our sleep. And this is one of the ways that he can do this. And I have read books about real living Christians who have prayed for a theophonic manifestation in their dreams, and they have been answered. But that's not something I don't necessarily need. And I'm not even sure it's part of his will or his plan for me. Then he opens the ears of men and seals their instructions. He is there to instruct, he is there to inform, he is there to teach, he is there to reveal, and in order to have his lesson he has to open the ears of men. So this is what he does when he speaks to us into our dreams and the subconscious. Most of our dreams are just the whimsies of the self-conscious, scientifically speaking, so it is not normal, an ordinary dream experience. It is not a normal human experience to be even visited once in a dream by divinity, but it does happen, it has happened, and it can happen, and it does happen, and it will happen. To turn men from works and conceal pride from man. So he can interrupt the proud sinner who is in the midst of scheming about, the type of people, the sadistic sinners who literally can't sleep at night, without knowing what chaos and havoc they plan to wreak tomorrow. When he interrupts Abimelech in his dream, he says, "Don't you dare take Abraham's wife to bed because she is his sister," and he's saying he is a prophet, he will forgive you. Abimelech does plead his own innocence, but he was not a proud sinner, but he was about to sin in ignorance, and this is now Abraham was the sinner at fault. He had lied, and this is the thing he did in Egypt as well. Sometimes it might be necessary and appropriate to the sadistic sinner who cannot get a wink of rest at night to be visited in the dream while he is plotting evil, and that is one of the ways that he can intervene. He can prompt the conscious and convict them and turn them from their path of destruction. He keeps back his soul from the pit and his life from passing away by the sword. So the purpose and the consequence of this intervention is to save one from the pit of hell, the grave, eternal torment in hell, and life passing away by the sword. That's one of the ways that life can pass away, but it's not the only way. But the important thing is that sin leads to death. The wages of sin is death, and we must die because we are sinners, but we can live because he who lived without sin died for us, and that's the miracle of the resurrection. But we're going to close up this lesson right here. He does speak as suffering as a form of revelation, and there's so much to say in what lies ahead that I couldn't possibly fit it in one lesson. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for being here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.